Inside the Seaside home, an addition created 3 different rooms that required 3 very different wall treatments. Interior designer Gina Freeman hired Sandra Kiss London of Faux Pro to do her clients' walls.
With the addition of the house, she's added a lot of wall space, and not wanting to put wallpapers on the walls, but wanting texture, wanting color, but not too much color, is when I thought that bringing Sandra in would be a huge benefit to covering a lot of the large walls that are in the house.
Here's the finished look of the family room. Sandra picked a warm color with subtle metallic highlights that took many steps. Now it starts with a Venetian plaster.
And you do what's called cross-hatching. Okay, what that is you're actually putting the product on and you're cross-hatching the product on to create this texture.
When this is done, she adds a clear, flat wax.
And it's a protective coat that goes on top of your plaster. It's also what gives your plaster sheen and allows for you to burnish your product. So you can just put that right on, and you can see it starts to come to life.
She sporadically applies a mix of gold and copper metallic wax over the clear wax. The final touch is burnishing, rubbing the knife back and forth over the wax surface once it's dry. Owner Robin Falzoni loves the way her family room looks.
The undercurrents of the paint, there's gold and silver within the paint, within the plaster, the way that it shines, and it really depends on the lighting of the day and the time of the day. You can have completely different feels.
The bathroom walls are by far the most dramatic. The homeowner gave Sandra free rein to get creative, unlike most faux wall finishes which are meant to blend into the background.
Sky was the limit as to what we're going to do, because she wanted the walls to so dominate the space.
Leaves and fossils seem to leap from the walls. Sandra shows us the layering it took to achieve this effect. Now here's what the room looked like before the details were added. At this point, red plaster has been rolled onto the walls to get them ready for the stencils.
I'm going to actually just cross-hatch a little bit of product on, but I'm actually putting it on pretty thick, and I'm actually just kind of skimming the surface. So my knife is almost flat to the wall at this point.
She carefully puts a leaf right on the wall before the plaster dries. Next, she'll do a raised stencil.
You're going to use the plaster. Okay, and we're going to just go over the stencil like this and just gently sort of go over the surface, almost like frosting a cake actually, and then you just remove the excess, and then you pull back your stencil, and I'm using a low-tack tape, and you pull it back and there's your image.
Sandra makes sure everything is covered and the excess is removed before removing the stencil. The stencils are then covered with a metallic wax.
And you're going to just put your sponge right in there and grab that wax, okay? Just use a regular kitchen sponge, and you're going to just polish the wall with the wax.
It takes a couple of coats of the wax before Sandra can apply a black glaze.
And I'm going to start to polish over this. And you can see as I rub the glaze over the wax, it's calming it down to make it much more pleasant to the eye. It's exposing all of the detail.
The varnish brings out the color of the wax, seals the surface, and adds a sheen to the wall. And Gina is delighted with the finished bathroom walls.
And it's just fun. It's very different. It's what we fell in love with when we first went to Sandra's studio.
The walls of the entertainment room downstairs have a very tactile quality. The color was picked to complement the window treatments.
Sort of a rough sand finish, which is a great finish, just bringing in the environment, the outdoors, into this beautiful room downstairs.
The thick weathered plaster used here has a sandy texture. It's applied with a sea sponge.
And what we're going to do is actually dip that sea sponge right into the product. And again, very heavy, a much heavier plaster. All right, and then we're going to just sponge on this texture. So we're going to let it sit on the wall for about 30 seconds or so before you actually knock it back. And it's just adding a really nice interest.
Sandra uses a flat instrument called a float and then rubs it over the plaster to flatten the high areas. This is called knocking it back. The color comes from fizzy pigment tablets that are put in water. Now the ratio is 1 tablet per 8 ounces of water, and it takes about 10 tablets to do a 6-foot by 6-foot room.
And just by taking your sponge and rubbing that onto the plaster, you started to create a nice colorway.
Sandra has to push fairly hard. This plaster is thick.
The final color is, if you want to add a little bit more texture here, you can. The white actually is going back to the weather plaster, the original sponge that we use, and just sponging on very little at a time.
This technique gives the wall a little more visual interest. For Sandra, Gina, and Robin, the hard work in all the rooms has been worth it.
The overall project was great. It turned out really, really well. The finishes are fantastic. We were on schedule. We came in on budget, so I'm happy.
The colors are subtle, but they're there. The textures are subtle, but they're there, and they create a beautiful difference in a room.
They're classic, they're subtle, and they're beautifully, beautifully executed.